All right. Well, hopefully this is maybe working and we're live right now. So welcome everyone. Shabbat Shalom. Happy Friday, TGIF, whatever feels good and works for you. It's the end of the week and we are thrilled. And of course, we're going to be making some challah. So hopefully you have your ingredients with you. If not, you can go down to our previous video that we submitted yesterday. Click that link. It'll give you a full list of the different ingredients. We'll be making a classic challah with me, and we'll be making a vegan challah with Chef Lana. And we'll kind of be going back and forth between the two of us. If there's something that's different for Lana's vegan recipe, she's going to pop in and let you know. Also, Lana has her camera on her vegan challah bowl so that you can get a little bit more of a visual full picture of what's going to be happening with all of the dough action. So that being said, we're going to get started. So these are kind of the general things that we're going to need. I'm going to hold them up just so you know, and then we'll kind of roll with it. So the first thing we need is 3 3/4 teaspoons of active yeast. I'm going to do a little zoom in. Hello, this is 3 3/4 teaspoon. That's roughly about 2 packets if you have the packets. So again, 3 3/4 teaspoon. And with that, we're actually going to be adding a tablespoon of sugar. Why are we doing this? What's with the sugar? We want the yeast to be as active as possible. So imagine if you just did a really intense workout, you're feeling really hungry, you're feeling thirsty, the yeast needs all of this yumminess that it can possibly get. So we're adding sugar to get it even more active, so that when we add our warm water, which I'm going to do pretty soon, not only will the warm water get it active and moving and warmed up, the sugar is going to kind of triple that and make it even more active, so that hopefully within about 5 minutes, it's going to be nice and frothy. And Lana, if you have any other fun facts about our yeast magic, let me know.
So the reason that we're activating the yeast is because it's active dry yeast. If you were using instant yeast, you could skip this step entirely. So for active yeast, you have to do this step, but for instant, you do not.
And then, so like I said, 3 3/4 teaspoon with 1 tablespoon of sugar, just plain white sugar. And we're going to be adding some lukewarm, let's see where we're at, 1 3/4 cup of water. So again, we don't want it to be too hot because that'll actually kill the yeast, which is not ideal. And we also don't want it to be, I'm actually going to flip this. We don't want it to be too hot, and we also don't want it to be too cold because then it won't activate at all. So a nice lukewarm temp is great. A trick I use is that I kind of feel the inside of my wrist, and that feels pretty good. And so that's how I know it's not too hot. I'm actually just going to flip this into my...
Your yeast are actually just tiny babies.
I know they need all the support they can get.
Yeah, so for mine, it is roughly about 3/4 of a cup of water, 3/4 of a teaspoon of active dry yeast, and a 1/2 tablespoon of sugar in here. I'm just going to set that aside, and you basically just want to wait until it's foamy or it starts to kind of look a little bit like miso.
It's like a little bubbly mini jacuzzi. So we'll set that aside. And again, if you use, let's say you're using a new, maybe big package, which is what I have, just make sure to keep that in the fridge once you've opened it, because that's how they stay relatively active. And if you didn't use all of your yeast, maybe for your packet, definitely keep it in the fridge. It'll help it last much longer.
And also tape it, because
oh my God, yeah. Tape. Oh my God. I had yeast spill all over my fridge just the other day, and it was really sad. Very sad. Okay. So we've got our yeast, and then the next thing I'm going to do is actually put the yeast, let's give it a nice little whisk, get it all bubbly. I already see the little bubbles coming, which is very exciting. So I'm gonna get a large bowl, a very large bowl, because this is gonna be the bowl that the entire challah is gonna be utilizing. So I'm gonna now, while the yeast is getting all activated, gonna add my canola oil or vegetable oil. So either oil that you've got. And I have half a cup. So we're gonna add half a cup of oil into the large bowl.
I'm using vegan butter that I melted, which is roughly kind of like oil. You could use oil for the vegan one as well. But I just melted it to incorporate it a little bit easier. And mine is a 1/4 cup because I'm doing a half recipe.
Brilliant. Okay, so we've got our oil. Ooh, and I just realized we need things I didn't want to put on the table too soon because I wanted to make sure they stayed relatively cold. We need our eggs for mine. So I have 4 eggs here. The 5th one we're going to save for the egg wash. Again, if you're doing half the recipe, totally understandable because this is going to make gigantic family size, air quotes, loaves of challah. So either you can do just the 2 eggs for now if you're doing the half loaf, but I'm going to do the full recipe. So we're going to go with 4 eggs.
And so for mine, I'm using what's called aquafaba. And aquafaba is the liquid from a can of chickpeas that is often used as an egg replacer. It's great for doughs, especially enriched doughs, which is what a challah dough is. Enriched just means that instead of regular bread, which is usually just typically water, flour, and maybe yeast, you're adding in fat and you're adding in eggs usually, but aquafaba is a good replacement. So to activate my aquafaba, I'm gonna whip it a little bit. I already put a little, like a sprinkle of cream of tartar in here. And I used about 5 tablespoons of the liquid and then a pinch. So then I'm gonna mute my audio briefly so that you don't have to hear the horrendous whisk noise.
That's so courteous. I don't think I'm going to do that. So everyone can enjoy the whisk noise that I'll do. So again, it's 4 eggs for the full recipe. So we're going to start adding it to our large bowl of oil, our half cup oil, either canola or veg. And we're going to, as we do each egg, just give it a whisk. And then we'll go on to our second egg. It's funny because when I think of aquafaba, I always think of the Great British Bake Off episode where they had to make vegan recipes and they had to do meringues with aquafaba and everyone was freaking out. Great times and a great show. All right, so that's my second egg. On to number 3. Lana, when you do get off mute, I'm very curious why you added the cream of tartar into your aquafaba medley. I assume it's to help thicken it up, but I could be wrong. My second egg, on to number 3.
Brianna, I have a quick question for you.
Lana, when you do get off mute, I'm very curious why you added. Can you mute the Facebook video? Yeah. Do you want to mute the Facebook video? And then ask your question? I assume it's helped thicken it up, but my second egg, on to number 3.
Brianna, I have a quick question for you.
Yeah?
Sorry, it's on a delay, but my question for while you're whisking the eggs, I don't think you mentioned this. Is there a reason that I know some Jewish folks might crack them in separate bowls for a reason? Like, is there anything they're looking for maybe?
I can't tell if that's a leading question that you want me to answer or if you know the answer and you want to say. Do you know
I'm whisking, so I can't hear anything. So if you could repeat the question, Margot, that would be great.
So I think the reason why so many Jewish families will check the eggs is to make sure that there is no parts of the chicken, I believe, to make sure that it is going to be kosher, because you don't want any blood or other parts that are in the egg, which sometimes happens. So I'm pretty sure that's why you can check each egg one at a time before you toss it into the batter. Also great to prevent getting eggshells unnecessarily in your mix. Also ideal. All right, so I am good for now. Those are my 4 eggs with our half a cup of oil. So I think Lana is slowly getting there with the aquafaba. I know it takes a lot of bicep power to really whip that thing up. So we are going to add, oh, look how beautiful. Oh, wow. That yeast, it's got, I'd say at least an inch of like frothy, bubbly layer. Similar to beer, it looks wonderful. And I wonder, let's see if you can see that. Probably not, but it's pretty bubbly and wonderful. So now it's ready to go. We're gonna add this to our egg and oil mix. So I'm gonna take the yeast with the water and a little bit of sugar. And we're just gonna pour it in.
All right, check it out. So that's the aquafaba after you whip it. It actually, you add the cream of tartar because it will help when you whip it. Sometimes it's just to basically guarantee you'll get foam and peaks. It's why often you'll see cream of tartar used in meringues and things like that. Sort of just ensures that you'll get it.
Oh, yum. What a great life hack. So Lana, I just added the yeast to my oil and egg mix, just so you know. So that's where I'm at. I'm gonna stir that whole thing up. Nice gentle stir, doesn't take a lot to get it combined.
I'm gonna do the same thing.
Fantastic. And then I have set aside, this is half a cup of cane sugar. Everyone has different tricks for their challah. Some people do honey instead of sugar. Some people I know have tried applesauce. Some people will do maple syrup, agave. So there's always a little bit of a sweetener of some sorts because, as we know, challah is a sweet bread, a sweet eggy bread. So we've got half a cup of sugar that I'm going to sprinkle in to our large bowl. And then as well with that, I'm going to take my salt. I've got sea salt, but my God, if you have kosher salt, you lucky, lucky, lucky challah baker you. And we're going to take a tablespoon of your salt. So again, I've got sea salt. It's what I got. I'm going to work with it. But we're going to take a tablespoon, assuming it can come out reasonably fast.
Yep, I put the aquafaba in. I added a 1/4 cup of sugar and a half tablespoon of salt. Also, fun fact, normal regular sugar you get at the grocery store is not vegan at all. So if you're vegan, don't be using white sugar. And I'll have you look that up for another time.
Oh my God, I never knew that.
Yeah, white sugar's not vegan. They process it. I might as well just tell you. They process it with animal bones to turn it white, because sugar itself isn't white actually.
Oh my God, I've learned so much. Okay. Wow.
Same vegan.
You know, welcome to challah baking. The more you know, I swear you learn something new every time. Okay, so in this large bowl, we've got our yeast. We got the little bit of sugar with the yeast. We've got the water that was lukewarm. We've got the 4 eggs. We've got the half cup sugar. And we've got a tablespoon of salt of your choice. Always recommend kosher. I've got sea salt. It's fine. We'll all survive. So next is really the best part. But before we start, please make sure that your hands are no jewelry, please. I have a watch on. I'm going to take it off because I know what is to come and I don't want to deal with picking challah bits out of my watch, nor do I recommend having any rings on, bracelets, hair ties, etc. It gets everywhere. Don't want to even bother. Don't want to fuss. So I have pre-sifted, because I am doing this live. I would never do this normally, but pre-sifted, this is about 9 cups of flour. My recipe actually only calls for 8 to 8.5. The reason why I just threw in some extras because when we're kneading the dough, you always need more flour because it'll end up being a little bit sticky. So we're just going to add a little bit more. So highly recommend sifting the flour. Just takes out any clumps that you might have. It just makes it a much smoother process. So we are going to slowly, about, I would say, if you are doing the half portion, again, you're only going to do about 4 to 4.5 cups of flour for mine. So I would recommend throwing in about a quarter of the way of your total. So if you're doing the full recipe, you can throw in about 2 cups to start. If you're doing the half recipe, start it off with just 1 cup, and then we'll give it a stir. And again, you want to be gentle. We're probably going to have flour end up everywhere, but ideally we're going to try our best to not get it unnecessarily places that it doesn't need to go. On the floor, on my window, the shirt, shorts, table, chairs, hair, etc. You'll start to see it's getting slightly clumpy, and that's just fine.
So I'm slowly incorporating flour. I started with about 4 cups. This recipe, when it's a half recipe, usually takes between 4 and 6 cups. It's starting to pull away, which is great from the sides, and it'll stick to your fingers. Try to clean them off as you go. And then I think I actually have a good amount in here to start kneading. I don't usually knead in the bowl. Some people do. I'm going to go on ahead. And that was just, it came together pretty good with those 4 cups. So I'm going to turn my dough out onto a floured surface and start kneading. If you have an electric mixer at home, like a KitchenAid situation, and it has a dough hook, lucky you, you don't have to knead anything by hand. You can have your machine do it for you. If you don't have that, you got to use your 2 hands. And for me, it's usually anywhere from a 10 to 15 minute process where if it starts to feel sticky, I'll put a little more flour down on my table. And basically you just keep kneading it until you put your finger in the dough and it springs back.
I'm still working in my flour. There's a lot, I'm doing the full recipe. So I've got I think I've added 6 cups so far. I've got another 2-ish to go. It's slowly getting, again, you'll start to feel it. It'll get a little bit thicker. It'll start getting a little bit more difficult to really mix, but it's not impossible. It's still, whippable. I'm going to add my final final-ish 2 cups of flour. And like Lana said, if you have the dough hook, you are welcome to sort of skip a step, if you will, or skip the workout of challah making. However, as my grandmother would say, all of the love really gets infused when you're kneading things, or really get out all of your anger and hatred. So one of the two, it's your choice, but really recommend always working the hands. I know that sometimes, actually, Lana, can you overwork?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, you can definitely overwork dough. Usually what happens is when you overwork the gluten, by the time you end up cooking it, it's going to be very dense. So it'll be what they call in the Great British Baking Show, very close textured, which is not a good thing for challah. Challah is supposed to be kind of like, not light, but it's definitely, it has like a texture about it. It's not thin spread at all.
Kind of airy.
Chef Lana and Brianna, we have a question from Noah. Thanks for joining us. They want to know, what's the best way to achieve a softer crust? What's the best way to achieve a softer crust?
All right, I've got an idea, but Lana, you want to go first?
Well, for me, the outside, so I think if you're talking about the outside, I think it really depends on what you brush it with. For me, I usually brush mine with chickpea liquid and maple syrup. You also want to bake with what's called a bain-marie in your oven, or at least I do that when I'm making breads. And that is when you have something filled with water at the bottom of your oven, like a cake pan or a loaf pan. And so you get steam. So it kind of helps ensure that you won't have like this sort of dense crust on the outside. But that would be what I would say. What about you, Brianna?
Thinking about like the baking time and the temperature, because sometimes the reason why it can get so crunchy is because it's a higher temperature for a little bit longer. So you can also play around, you know, nothing is permanent. These aren't the 10 commandments here. So you can really do whatever feels right. If you tried it out and maybe it was a little crunchy, almost to the point of it being burnt, try doing it at a lower temperature, or do it at the temperature that it says in the recipe. Lower it after like maybe 20 minutes or so when you check on it, flip it around, lower the temp. Maybe originally it was set for 375, try doing it down to 350, checking on it every now and then. I think it's probably the best way that I would do it. Also, different toppings have different effects. So we'll talk about egg wash in a little bit, but I think that sometimes you get a little bit of different textures when you have different kinds of egg washes. I've had an egg wash recipe that was just very simple. It was literally just the egg. I had a wonderful Rebbitzin, so a rabbi's wife, who taught me that if you really want a great egg wash with kind of like a burnt glaze look, you add about a tablespoon or so of sugar into your egg medley, and that'll give it like a nice burnt glaze texture. Or sometimes you just want to have a simple sea salt, you know, or kosher salt sprinkled on top. So I think also thinking about your egg wash and thinking about the different toppings that you're going to use can lead to all of the possibilities. So I'm about at 8.5 cups. It's gorgeous. I'm going to sprinkle some flour. Again, this is why I over sifted extra. We're going to plop it down onto the table. You can always use, you know, waste not, want not. I always use floured fingers to get all the extra challah bits out of the bowl. It also makes my life easier later when I have to do all the dishes. So
hey, Brianna, you got a message from your cousin Lauren who's watching and says hello and they miss you. I also want to give a shout out to a couple of other folks watching. Mimi and her family from the Oakland After School program are baking and say Shabbat Shalom. And also Connor from the Oakland After School program, who is a full-time baker in the kitchen sometimes. He loves to bake. He's a baker and wants you to know it. He's also out there. So hi to everyone there.
Oh, hello. So wonderful. Love having all of the little shout outs. Okay, so we are also, just so viewers at home know, my laptop is precariously sitting on top of a small little box with a little piece of wood on top of it. So if it gets a little wobbly, I do apologize. I'm just hoping the whole thing doesn't collapse and fall over. But, you know, if it does, we'll roll with it. We'll roll with it. So again, it's feeling a little sticky. We don't want to over flour it because it's just, you know, we don't want to add too much when it doesn't need it. And I like to really use the inside of my palm. Use the heel of your hand to press down. Imagine you're doing CPR and you're trying to save your challah dough. This is how we're going to do it. So I do a press. It smushes the challah around, and then I bring it up and over to kind of fold into itself. So it's a press and then fold over on itself. Press and fold. And it's funny because once again, my God, I love this show. I just will never forget every time I need challah, there's a Great British Bake Off contestant who he would like take the whole thing and like fling it down onto the table. It was the scariest and most fascinating way I've ever seen challah, or not challah, I've ever seen bread kneaded before. And
Everybody's got
something to be seen.
You know, everybody's got their own style. Some of the
Also, I forgot to mention Dane's watching. Hi, Dane.
Oh, hey, Dane.
Teacher from Joaquin Miller Kids Club.
Whoop, whoop.
When I
and Hagrid and Snape.
Right?
And
when
Dumbledore.
Teaching a dough class, some of the kids think you knead dough by just punching it. Truly just putting your fists in it and punching it.
Oh, that is, I mean, that's maybe good for you, for your personal aggression. You know, if you need to get that out, you can get that out, but not ideal for the challah. So Lana, what's happening when we knead? Like, I know, you know, I've done a few different challah bakes. Sometimes I'm in a rush and I think to myself, you know, it wouldn't be so bad if I just did a quick little smushy smush and then we're on to the baking process. And then, of course, I go to see the dough an hour later and it's barely risen. So what's going on? Why is kneading so important?
This is how you're developing gluten, truly. Gluten is what gives bread its structure. You know, it's flour, at least all-purpose flour, which is what we're cooking with, doesn't have as high of a gluten content as, say, bread flour does. So we have to work the dough a little bit more here to develop that gluten in the bread to create those protein structures for when we bake. And that's, again, part of why the yeast are so helpful, because the yeast are going to help in that rising process. So you have the proteins working from the gluten, and you have the yeast working, helping your bread rise. If you don't knead your bread enough, it won't rise, and your protein structure isn't developed, and it'll be very dense.
Yeah, so if you're ever wondering why your challah didn't knead or didn't rise, it could be simply due to the fact that you did not work that dough enough. Yeah. It also could be, remember what we said earlier too, I've had similar bread catastrophes happen where I actually, in theory, did everything right, but I had used too hot of water and I had actually killed the yeast.
Oh, yeah.
So that was why it literally just stayed like a total flat ball of dough. And it was so sad. And I was like, why? I did everything right. And I was like, oh, because I basically used boiling water and that was a big faux pas.
Well, and because this is an enriched dough, you know, it has fat and it has the eggs in there. So the yeast are having to do more work than they would usually. They're having to work with that fat and those eggs in your dough. And so for enriched doughs, it sometimes takes longer to proof.
Bless you, little yeast. Working so hard.
Oh, no, that's why I give them so much sugar. They love it.
And so there's always going to be, I feel like, a slight stickiness. So don't be worried if, you know, you're kind of rolling it on the table and it's still sort of sticking and you're like, do I add more sugar? The trick is, Lana had mentioned it earlier, is that once it's in a ball, you know, it's like, okay, it is sort of, there's like a little bit of stick back when you're taking your hand off, but the trick is you just take your thumb, you're going to press it in, and if the indent rises back to you and disappears, that's when you know you've done a good job. So I did a little press. It's slowly rising back. I'm going to do a little bit longer just to guarantee it's really getting worked.
So I'm done kneading mine. I did the finger test, and I put it back in that bowl we had mixed it in, and I put a little oil in the bowl, and I'm just rubbing that oil all around my dough and the sides so that when it rises, it won't stick. And then I'm going to take this, I'm going to cover it with, I'm going to use a tea towel, but really you could cover it with plastic, a tea towel, something like that. And mine has to rise an hour. I don't know about yours.
Mine does need an hour. And you know what's interesting too, Lana, I'm not sure if you've done this before or if this is a common thing or just something in my household, which is that you can take your tea towel and actually, before you put it on the bowl, kind of soak it in a hot water, drain that hot water, and the heat from the towel or the heat from the water now on the towel actually helps it in the rising process as well. It helps create a little bit of steam.
I have not done that before, but I would see why. I mean, to me, that makes sense. For when I do mine, I usually put the dough
Perfect
on the bowl on top of my oven that's preheating so that the heat from the oven will rise. Thus, the bowl will have heat next to it and the rising will go a little bit faster.
Brilliant. Also a great life hack. So like Lana said, I'm done. So I'm going to add, again, same canola oil or vegetable oil. I just do a quick little spoonful or a drizzle in the middle of the bowl. I'm going to take my fingers and actually just rub it all the way around. We want to get oil all over the inside of the bowl, again, to prevent sticking so that when it rises, and we need to take it out to start braiding, it'll easily come out of the bowl. So that's well oiled. Gonna slowly lift my challah up.
I have a quick question.
And I'm gonna go put it next to the oven since it's already on.
So Lana, you and Brianna mentioning the pressing your thumb in to see if it was kneaded enough. What about the window pane test? Do you ever use that? Or like, is that a similar method, or is that for something else completely?
So the window pane test is to check and see how you're developing the gluten in dough. So you could definitely do that if you're comfortable doing it. Just for most bakers, it depends on how experienced they are for what to look for. So I wouldn't recommend necessarily the window pane test to any baker unless they like know exactly what to look for in that structure when they hold it up to the light. The bounce back test is just one of those things where it's like, because it's tactile and you can see it, it's a little bit easier for like more novice bakers. But the window pane test is also a very good test and something that you can definitely do.
Thanks, that's helpful because I think I've been using the window pane test for some breads, and I think I'm still novice and I need more time to develop like gluten to figure that out. And I also want to say hi to Nina. Nina's also watching, our awesome after school director.
What's up, Nina? Brianna, did you, with the power of television / an hour early, make a round of dough that's ready to braid?
Oh yeah, I just smushed it down. Give me 1 second.
This is my dough after it's risen for an hour. I made a dough earlier because there is not enough to fill an hour of time with unless you really wanted some really bad dad jokes.
So like we said earlier, assuming you did not, if you are following along with us, assuming you did not use the magic of television, Food Network, etc., remember, you're gonna let it rise for an hour. I always recommend punching down the dough every about 20 minutes or so, just kind of deflate it, let the yeast do even more of its job, giving it more of a workout. And then after the hour, we're gonna take it out. And now this is arguably the best part, or the hardest, depending on how you feel, which is the braiding part. So don't be alarmed because this is actually, this morning I did half the recipe because my God, I can only have so much challah in my house and I, got to be conscious of that. So this is half the recipe. I'm gonna do my best to kind of eyeball it and glance and see, okay, well, I'm gonna do a 3 braided. So I'm gonna try to chunk it out into 3 semi-equal balls. And if you are a professional like Lana, you will have the pastry cutter as well as a scale so you can more accurately weigh each braid that you will do, because you want ideally to get them as close as possible to being the same weight so that you can roll them out roughly to the same size. And like I said, I have three little balls, and I'm gonna turn the camera down a little bit more so you can see that a little bit better. I'll move this out of the way once we're done with that. All right, so
I have about 280 grams per section.
Yum, yum, yum. Okay, so now this is kind of the most fun and also the most creative part, which is when you can decide, do you want to do a 3 braid, very classic traditional? Do you want to do a 4 braid? Do you want to do a 6 braid? So we are going to stick with 3. It's the easiest, I would say. I just did a 3-part braid before this with my hair, so I'm very well versed in it. You can also, if you don't want to make a full loaf, you can always do little challah knots with Challah for Hunger. They call them dollar challahs because you can sell them for $1. And it's when you take really small snakes and you just coil it either like a snail shell, or you can just literally make a little knot, bake it in the oven. It takes about 10 minutes, super easy. So we're gonna stick with the braid, and the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna start making the classic snake. So we're just gonna gently roll. I feel like I use my whole hand when I'm rolling the snakes out. From heel of my palm all the way to the fingers and back. And also, if you're like, that is way too long to fit on my tray, which I'm realizing with this one. So I'm literally just gonna cut it in half, and I'll just make 2 loaves with this guy, which is totally fine. So that we've got a little bit more. And again, like I said, if you're doing this is the half recipe. When I made the dough with you all earlier, that's a full recipe. So my half recipe is going to make roughly 2 medium-sized loaves, which means the full recipe will give you 2 very gigantic family-style loaves. Again, just keep in mind, the thicker the dough is and the thicker the braid is and the bigger the challah loaf is, the longer you're going to need to bake it in the oven. So always keep that in mind, that the larger the dough recipe is, the larger the challah bake is, and the longer it's going to take to bake.
And I would say if you have a bigger loaf, I would do a lower oven temperature. So like if you were doing a loaf that's fairly large, it would almost behoove you to do your oven temperature at around 325 for a longer period of time to ensure that the inside gets cooked at the same rate as the outside, because the last thing you want is to have this super pretty, lovely challah, and then all of a sudden you cut into it and it's super doughy.
Very true.
I have a special viewer named Kit, who's going to be with us at the JCC. Hi, Kit.
Kit, are you making challah? No judgments if you're not. I also realize that there is a lag between the Zoom video recording and the Facebook live viewing. So I will maybe get an answer in about a minute. All right, so 1, 2, 3, 4. Got 4.
Are you doing a 4 braid?
You know, I might try to knock out a 6 because I think I have enough to stretch it out.
I would never, but you follow your dreams.
It's funny because
Kit is not baking challah, but it's all right.
She's making it in spirit. Don't worry, Kit. You're making challah with us in spirit. Okay, so here we go. That's looking very long, so we'll take some off of that. And it's so interesting because once you learn, the braiding can be very intimidating, but if you can have, and I always recommend, if you can have, I don't like the videos. It's hard for me to process what's going on when I watch people braiding the challah. But what I do really enjoy, and I find it much easier, is to look up the braid you want to do. So let's say you want to do a 6 braid, and try to look up colorful strands that are used, because that I find very, very helpful. It gives you a nice visual of different colors and also the numbers. So you can kind of see, okay, number 4 in this image. So it's like the purple one, and that needs to go 2 over, and I loop the other one out. So always try different methods. You know, if the video isn't working for you, try out an image, try out a little kind of like lanyard making. All right, so I think, woo, hello. Okay, and then here we go.
So I have to proof mine for another hour. So I'm gonna put mine on a baking tray. Also, I'm trying to connect them. Yes.
So I will say also that
Whee!
if you wanted, oh, it's beautiful, Lana.
Trust me.
Lovely round challah.
Trust me.
Classic for Rosh Hashanah, which is the Jewish New Year, to symbolize the circle of the year, the calendar.
I can definitely tell you they did not look this good the first time I did it. Sam and Brianna can attest my braiding was not great.
Perfect. Okay, so I'm going to do first a 3 braid, because there's 2 techniques that I want to teach you all, which I think hopefully will be helpful. Let's see. Margot, Narita, Sam, can you guys see the 3 strands okay if I do it from here? Or should I move the computer down more?
Your name is kind of blocking it. So if you move just like your name label is blocking it, a little more down would be good.
A little more down. Okay. Let me move this stuff back as well. Ooh. How's that? Is that a little bit better?
Yeah, much better.
Okay,
Definitely
great.
see the 3.
Okay. So excited for all the dishes to come and the table cleaning. Okay, so there's 2 little tricks that one I actually learned from I think it was one of the Oakland after school moms who taught us this trick. So shout out to Liz. But ideally when you make the challah and when you're doing the braiding, you want to start actually in the middle. So sometimes we get really caught up in working at the top, and it actually makes it kind of uneven. So I recommend, if possible, starting in the middle, and this way you're getting a little bit more of an even braid, and you can just kind of leave it undone for now, because you don't really need to worry about having that cinched up just yet. And then once you get to your ends, you're going to take the 3 pieces, smush them all together, and then do like a tuck underneath the challah. And that'll help, hopefully, it'll help your ends stay together, because sometimes what happens when you bake them is the ends kind of come apart and you get little like lobster claws. And while it still will be delicious, it's not aesthetically as pretty. So I recommend pinching all 3 strands together and then tucking them underneath the challah. If you wanted to then turn it into a round one, I wouldn't do the 3 pinching and tucking yet. I would wait until they're connected, pinch all of them together. So that is an option as well. So that is the 3. And now, you can also do a 2 braid one, which is for another time. But while we have you, If you want to do chocolate chips, aka if you are, have a semi-sweet tooth, or if you have any children in the house, this is probably a likely option. Take your strand and you're just going to lightly press all the way down on your strands. So we're going to lightly press down. So it's more of like a flattened roadkill snake, if you will. Take your chips and you're going to, as if it were making little buttons on a shirt. And again, this is a trick from Challah for Hunger. So shout out to those awesome ladies who are making challah like it's no one's business.
This is also where you could do the same thing with dried fruits as well, correct? Like you could do it with your raisins. If you
yeah.
That kind of.
I think this way is the best, just because you're guaranteeing even dispersal of this, whatever it is. So it could be raisins, it could be the chocolate chips. And it's just, I find it much easier, and you're not so worried about, oh, I took a bite out of the challah and I'm not getting anything, even though it's supposed to be a chocolate chip challah or a raisin challah. So this is just kind of guaranteeing you're getting a nice even distribution of chocolate or raisin or what have you with every bite.
As we all know, the worst thing that could happen is you bite into a bake and all of the stuff is at the bottom.
Oh my God, it's horrific. It's a Paul Hollywood nightmare, if you will.
It's a tragedy, truly.
Okay, so it's like almost like a nice little studded belt. And now we're gonna actually fold it onto itself.
Hang on, did you wear a studded belt?
Did you? Not frequently, but I definitely owned one.
All right, this is gonna age me. I shopped at Hot Topic. I won't lie about it.
Oh, there's no shame. There's no shame here. I shopped at Hot Topic mostly for Panic the Disco things because, my God, I love them.
Panic at the Disco.
Oh yeah, panic exclamation point.
Very true, very true.
Okay, so I folded it onto itself. So now it looks like now my snake has digested something, and so it's a much more plumper looking snake roll. You can give it a little gentle roll to make sure it's all evenly done. And then that's how I would do the next two if you wanted to do the 3 braid of the smush down, adding the chips, raisins, what have you, folding it over onto itself, smushing that down, rolling it out gently, and then doing the full braid. You can also do the same thing where you can maybe sprinkle it with cinnamon sugar. That's like a nice way to get it also evenly spread. I've seen cocoa powder and sugar mix that you can also, again, it's the same thing. I might actually do that with my chocolate one to give it like a double extra chocolate yumminess. But also, whatever you want to do, try things out. If you want to try it with a lot of chocolate, go for it. I just would be careful again with what you put on top, because you don't want things, you just want to be mindful of things not burning. And speaking of what needs to go on top, we need to make, last but not least, our egg wash.
Brianna, Miss Sommer and Chef Lana, Nina had a really good question. Are challah always sweet, or can they also be savory? Are there any other tips for like if you want to do a savory?
Oh my God.
They can definitely do savory. I mean,
can you do savory? You can absolutely. It is an adventure, and you decide where you want it to go. I think recently I just saw a rosemary and goat cheese challah. I know Lana has talked about doing a bunch of different tahini style challahs as well. I think Lana, take it away. I'm sure you have oodles of ideas.
You could put like a curry powder. You could do like za'atar. That'd be really good. I would do one of 2 things. So you could do the method that Brianna did there, where she sort of folded those things in. I would do that with maybe your sort of bigger toppings, like sun-dried tomatoes, or maybe like put pesto in that way. But if you were doing like herbs or anything like that, I would mix that in as you're folding the dough so that it's incorporated all the way throughout. Same thing with like an olive situation, or curry powder or za'atar or really anything like that. And my other suggestion would be definitely add that first bit of sugar to activate the yeast, but I wouldn't necessarily add as much sugar in the second time when you're making the dough, because that could be a little bit aggressive, right? Then it would be like sweet and savory. Unless that's what you're going for, then sure. But I would lower the sugar amount in that second round to sort of make up for it, and maybe up the salt a little bit to make it more savory.
Also, might I just add, I think I've said this so many times in previous videos, but the everything bagel topping is so good. I love it. And I especially love it with challah. It gives it a nice savory taste to it. It's also still, even if it is semi-savory, you can always smear some cream cheese on it, and it is very scrummy. So such a good nosh. Okay, so we did our 1 egg. I added a sprinkle of sugar. You can do up to, I would say like a teaspoon. You can go up to a tablespoon depending on how sweet you want to go with it. I do a quick dash of salt to give it a little flavor. And I've got my baking tray ready to go. Again, these are going to expand. So even though it may not look as big as you think it is, it will get bigger. And I actually recommend something that I know Lana's doing right now is once you braid it, give it time to rise a little bit more, at least, 20 minutes. Get that yeast going even more, and then throw it in the oven. I think Lana, you said you're going to be doing it for about an hour.
Yeah, I let it rise twice. I find that the double rise creates a better and lighter crumb texture. So to me, especially with vegan things can often get dense. So the double rise is really to ensure that my bread's going to stay really light. So Brianna had her egg mix. The mix that I use is the aquafaba. So whatever chickpea liquid you didn't use. And then I put a little bit of maple syrup in it. And this is to ensure that when I bake it, I end up with that nice, deep, golden brown color that we like on the outside of challah. After you put either of those egg washes on, that would be when you add your toppings. So you could sprinkle on salt. You could do, I think Brianna over there is going to do some everything bagel seasoning, but you just want to make sure you use either, a pastry brush, which I have. You can also spoon it on or use a rubber spatula and be very gentle with it. And then just rub that mixture on before sprinkling anything on. I know some of our kids in the past before have done a cinnamon sugar topping as well. And I know that that's worked out pretty well.
Exactly, yeah. So I just did everything bagel. It's okay if you get a little, some toppings might spread. It's okay. I also just punched down that dough. So remember I said about every 20 minutes of the hour that you're letting it rise, give it a little 1, 2 punch, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, whatever feels good. Give it a quick punch down. It just helps, again, activate the yeast, get it really going. So this is ready to roll. We're going to bake this at 375 for, I'm going to start with about 20 minutes. I'm going to take it out, rotate it, and then put it back. So this is kind of making sure we get a semi-even bake. I know, Lana, I think you actually switch which tray it's on in the oven as well. I know you've done that in the past, so that's also an option just to make sure you're kind of getting, because ovens are very mysterious creatures that, you want to give it as even of a bake as possible, so it's not just cooking on one end with the highest temperature in the back. So think about switching it around. A way that you can know if it's done, because this is also kind of like a a big question mark. Again, Lana mentioned that the bigger and thicker the challah loaf is, the longer time it needs. So when you pull it out, it should have a lovely golden brown color. And the real test, with gloves on, with an oven mitt on, with a towel, whatever you want to do to protect your hands, carefully turn over your challah, check the bottom, and it should be a very deep brown. So it almost to the point where you're like, did I burn it? No, you didn't, but that's how we know that the challah is done and fully cooked on the inside. I know you can also do the little
knock test.
Yep, you do a little knock test to see if it makes that little hollow sound.
I will also say on your baking trays, I don't have any parchment paper because my grocery store nearby is out. But if you have parchment paper or a silicone baking mat, definitely use either of those things because putting it directly on metal or aluminum foil will up your chances of burning the bottom, especially if you're putting a sugary, like sugar, into your egg mix. You run the risk of having that burn. You can also, like I said, do what's called a bain-marie in your oven. So that's what I'm going to do later when I put mine in, is I just have a cake pan filled with water. And you put that in the bottom, the very bottom, not the rack below, but like the very floor of your oven, and put this in there so that it creates steam, so that while your challah is in the oven, it sort of helps you prevent it from burning on the bottom.
Brill. Absolutely. I wish I had the silicone mats. Those are at the JCC, but I love using those because it just makes it much easier.
Where JCC? Oh my God.
So that is pretty much it. I mean, you know, you've got all the topping options, are whatever you feel like you want to do. If you just want to keep it simple and do the egg wash, you can do a final sprinkle of the kosher salt or your sea salt to give it a final bit of flavor. In the oven for 375, roughly 20 minutes, take it out, flip it around, go for another maybe 15, and then check on it. All of this is size dependent. So if you have a very large loaf, it's definitely going to take 45 minutes to an hour. If you're doing little dala challah, the little knots, those will take like maybe 10 minutes. So it's up to you. Use your own challah adventure, whatever feels good. We wish you the happiest of holidays. And Shabbat Shalom. And if you have any other questions, please feel free to comment in the video or shoot us a message. We'd be happy to chat.
We'd also love to see your finished challah. So if you follow either of our recipes, it would be great if you either sent them to us, felt comfortable posting them, had any videos of anybody making them, really anything. We'd love to see all of your challahs.
Absolutely. Such a good point, Lana. Thank you. So definitely share that if you want to share it on our Facebook. We'd love to see it. If you'd rather just email it to us, you can do info@jcceastbay.org. So that's info@jcceastbay.org. Again, I'm Brianna Sommer. I'm the Director of Youth and Teen Programs at the JCC East Bay, and my amazing, incredible co-pilot.
I am Lana. I'm a chef teacher at the JCC East Bay in Berkeley.
And so we just want to give a huge thank you to Lana, to Sam for being our amazing tech, for Margot and Nareda for helping us sync up with our Facebook fans that are having all of the wonderful shares and comments and questions. And yeah, Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Stay safe, stay healthy, enjoy the challah because it is so delicious. And Shabbat Shalom.
Bye, everybody.